Hi, it's Sandra Wyllie. I have a very important message for you today. A message that it took 1.5 years for me to really finally realize. Once I finally, broke away from these unethical psychologists. Sex in therapy is considered statutory rape. What happened to me was I was raped. Even though I gave consent, it is not consent. So if it's not considered consent, it's rape. My son was sexually abused too. I can't mention the names of places, but he was in a place and a staff member sexually abused him. Why? Because he could not give consent because of a severe illness he had for pneumococcal meningitis encephalitis, ate away a good part of his brain, so that my son emotionally is at the level of a 2-year-old. And because of that, he can never give consent. My husband and I are his legal guardians. He needs a legal guardian because he can't write, he can't sign his name, he can't read. He really is a 2-year-old. He looks at Winnie the Pooh books. He looks at 3-year-old books for preschoolers. So he can never give consent. But I never thought of it when I was in a relationship with Jim that it was rape, because I obviously am not handicapped. And they don't call borderline personality disorder a handicap. It's a mental illness, but it's not a handicap. And obviously I was of legal age to give consent, and I wasn't handicapped, so I didn't see it as rape. I thought I was in a relationship with Jim, a very bad relationship, a very abusive relationship, physically and verbally and emotionally. He abused me, but I never saw that as rape. Like my son was raped because it was obvious his mentality, he couldn't give consent. But that wasn't the case with me, so I didn't understand that. And then I had another Harvard psychologist, Dr. Richard Geis, encouraging me to have this relationship, saying, oh yeah, this happens a lot. I see couples in therapy that come to me for help with their relationship who are a psychologist and their patient. Like, yeah, this is, not uncommon. I really didn't even know, until I started looking into it, that 26 states, 26, call it a crime. It's called statutory rape. And that the psychologist can be imprisoned, go to jail. So after a while of breaking free and reading literature on this, did I realize I was raped. Imagine the shock of it for me. After 1.5 years of breaking away from a very abusive Dr. Richard Geis for many, many reasons, not just because he encouraged a sexual relationship with me and Jim, but for a lot of other reasons. There was so many reasons I can't get into, and this is beside the point, because this message that I'm bringing to you today is not about all those other reasons. It's about that sex in therapy is always rape. It is. You cannot ever say you gave consent. It might, while you're in it, it might look like you did. Like when a child doesn't turn away their father's sexual advances, they might say, well, I didn't say no. I let daddy touch me. I wanted to make daddy happy. Because of child's mentality, right? But when we're adults, we don't see ourselves like that. We say we're capable adults. We can make up our own minds. No, not as a patient, not as a therapy patient. Never, never. And I wrote an article on LinkedIn, because you go into therapy very vulnerable, okay? It's like you're on an operating table. And I've had medical doctors abuse me too. Yep. It's like you're in an operating table, okay, under anesthesia. That's how it is when you go into therapy. These psychologists are doctors. They have a doctorate degree. They're trained for years and years. You know, it's instilled in them. Sex and therapy never mix. It's instilled. They take a Hippocratic oath and vow, do no harm. So you may say you're an adult and you may think it's love. It isn't love. It's a crime. Rape is never love. Never, ever, ever love. It's a crime. And this is my one mission. And I've written many, many books. And I'll put the links down below about what happened. And, you know, I thought I initiated it. You know, he would flirt with me. He would say things like, I wonder what it's like if you were my, you know, if we had a personal relationship outside the office. He would hold me after every session. And I thought that, I told him all the time, I wanted this relationship. I was in love with him. I wanted to be his girlfriend. So I said, you know, I wanted this as you know, like he wanted it. But that's not true. I was in a very, very vulnerable position. I was not in a position to give consent, even though I thought I was, even though I thought this was love, even though I was going to leave my husband and move in with him. You see, when you're in the forest, you know, you can't see a clearing out of it. And, you know, you can't, you know, that saying, you're two in the forest to see the green, you know, you can't really see, you know, because you're in it. It took me 1.5 years of completely, you know, breaking free of all psychologists. It took me 1.5 years because I finally let go of Dr. Richard Geist, who I had for 16 years, after I called him in a crisis when my son was raped, okay? Then in another place, this is a different place, he was brutally beaten and tortured. I can't go into it because lawyers were involved and I signed something legal. So I can't go into the details or the place or name names or anything. All I can tell you is my son Alex and I have had a horrible, horrible existence. And now I'm fighting back. I'm making people aware that it's not okay. And not only did, you know, the person that did these crimes against my son, okay, get fired, and they're going to be held liable in court, but the people who watched and did and said nothing, they got fired too. That's why I made a complaint against Richard Geist, Dr. Richard Geist, to the board, because he knew all along and encouraged this relationship even before the relationship started. Even before I had sex with Jim or dated Jim or did anything unethical with Jim, Dr. Geist encouraged me to do so. You know, he planted the seed in my head. I'm a patient. I'm very vulnerable. He planted the seed. I said I was attracted to the psychologist. He was very handsome, very handsome. And, you know, he told me, oh, why don't you tell him to go upstairs and lie in bed with you? That'll be fun. You say, he's encouraging rape. So now I'm bringing him to the board and bringing him to task, but I can't get a lawyer for him like I did Jim because there's a time limit on these things when you want to pursue it legally. And in Massachusetts, it's 3 years. So in order for me to, you know, make a suit against Dr. Geist or send him a demand letter. Remember, in one of my videos, I said that you don't need to have any money to go after a psychologist legally. All you need is a lawyer to print up a demand letter. You don't even need to go to trial. If it involves sex, it's always against the law. Always. It's always a psychologist's fault. So what I was saying is it took a long, long time for me to realize what he did. What I was in was called rape, that he encouraged the rape, you know, and now I'm fighting up against Dr. Geist. Jim had already died. Jim died, okay? He died. He died in 2017, 15 months after I pursued him legally, and I pursued him with the board. He died of a heart attack. He just collapsed. But Dick is still out there, and he still needs to be brought, vindicated for what he did to me. You know, I'm a severe alcoholic. I'm a broken person. You're looking at a broken woman here, because I went to help for other things, right? And I got raped. I got sexually abused. So now all these other problems that I went to therapy for in the first place aren't solved. I never got help with it. Now I'm carrying another full load of all the abuse these psychologists did to me. And Dick and Jim weren't the only ones. I had another one who I also went to the board, and he surrendered his license. He tried to have phone sex with me. Can you imagine that? I was crying hysterically on the phone, and he said, how close to I can't mention, how close are you to, it's the opposite of going. I have to be very careful what I say on social media, because it's no good. I'm not going to get my message out if I get censored and this gets taken down. Yeah. So he had to surrender his license. I mean, it's just horrible. I will never, ever go to therapy ever again. They're all alike, all of them. And believe me, I went to dozens and dozens. I've had women, I've had men, and this is over this is across 2 decades. We're not talking about, there can be a bad apple wherever you go, but I just think that when a patient is putting themselves like on the table, and exposing, it's like being under general anesthesia and on the operating table, right? You're out. They can do anything they want to you. That's the message I'm trying to get across to people, okay? I'm gonna do it. It's my life's mission now, because I don't want anyone to suffer like I did. If you look up the literature on this stuff, they say women who were raped by their psychologists, like I was, a lot of them commit suicide. They said a lot of them never heal, like something like, 80 to 90% never heal. They're traumatized for life. Look up the literature yourself. But I'm trying to tell you from a personal perspective, from someone who's been through this, and just finally putting the spectacles on and seeing clearly and saying, hey, no, this is wrong. These people who are involved, not just the person who did the crime, but the person who cheered, who's on the sidelines and cheered it on. No, they have to be taken to task. And we, as people, we're consumers. Okay, we're consumers. And as a consumer, you need to go out and realize, hey, having sex with your psychologist is statutory rape. You cannot give consent, even though you think you can. You can't, because you're in a position of great vulnerability. They are in a position to take advantage, because they're not the ones telling you, all of their story. They're the ones sitting there, and they got everything on you. They got all your information and you have nothing on them. And they're the ones with the PhD, they're got doctor. Okay, they're a doctor. It says Dr. Richard Geist, Dr. James Barbieri. They're a doctor. They are a PhD, a doctor. Okay, and they've went to years and years of training for this, in residency, and this has been instilled in them that sex is never ever allowed. with a patient ever, even a former patient. You can't stop therapy to have sex with your patient. You can't say, okay, you're no longer my patient. Let's jump in bed. That's what happened with me and Jim. I told him this is no longer therapy. He said, okay. And then we started the sexual relationship, okay? That is the same thing, because you just end the therapy relationship and then the next day you're in bed with the person. So that's the same thing. So this is why I'm coming on, and I hope to get this message across of how much damage it did. I never was an alcoholic in my life. Never. I don't trust anyone now. I have no friends, no family. I don't trust anybody, and I will never do therapy again. Ever again. Because of the damage that has been done to me. So I just want you to know that you may think that you can give consent, and you may think it's a relationship, but rape is not a relationship, and a patient can't give consent. And that's what I want to leave you with, that it'll break you, and you'll never be the same person ever again. So learn from someone else's mistakes and report the person. Get a lawyer and go after them. Don't let this happen to you.